Just now we're talking a million miles an hour. Now they turn on the camera. I've got nothing to say.
Well, I think it's the end of a great 18 days of travel with the two of you. One of the many things actually that I'll take away from the trip is to walk away from here tomorrow morning as a very humble person. I think when one is put in charge of campaigns and one takes 40 volunteers down to Antarctica, you come away with a sense of entitlement that you've achieved a lot. But after seeing all your projects over all these years, I think the one thing that I definitely will always remind myself is that there's a lot more people doing way more than I will ever achieve or what I have so far in my life, and that everything that I do is one page in the book that ultimately after 25-30 years of my life will probably get to somewhere where somebody else has already set a level so high. And I think I was speaking to Brother John today at Morning Star, and he asked me what was one of the big things about the oceans, and I said being on the oceans reminds you about the power of nature and just how strong the oceans can be. And you can't take a ship and say I'll smash through the storm no matter how strong the wind is and how big the waves are and expect to survive. You relent knowing that you're powerless in that situation. Coming to India and seeing all the animal rights groups here and seeing all the projects that you have done made me reach a different level of being humble, of accepting that what we do is very small compared to what people in India do, the challenges that they face from the bureaucracy to the impression people have about them in a social standing to the amount of problems that they have to confront is way, way bigger than what I have to do on my campaigns at Sea Shepherd. And I think, as I mentioned before, one of the biggest things that I'll take away from me is seeing what the two of you and what you have achieved in your life and how you've put away years and years, chipping away slowly to finally now, for Peter and me to come at this stage and look into those projects and see them at their advanced stage of accomplishment. I was just thinking to myself how a lot of people think of their projects as being their babies. I think for the two of you, those projects are your grandchildren, where the people that you've given support to, like Pradeep or Karthik or Geeta, they are the parents and they've taken the support that you've given them and built the babies. And when you visit them, I see the love grandparents see for their grandchildren, which is to look at them as beautiful beings, to look at them as being something that they contributed towards, but not just directly, but also indirectly by changing a life. Because if you rear good children, then they go ahead and rear even better grandchildren. I think for the two of you, your projects in India are something like that. That's the way I see it. And the one thing that I said at dinner as well is, I'll walk away from here being less cynical about my own backyard. I think it's rejuvenated in me a spirit to come back and do good work in India and realize that this country is in need for a lot of good help, and it also has a lot of potential for change. And people with the right attitude need to be here doing the right thing as opposed to criticizing it and choosing to focus elsewhere.
Thank you, Sid. As usual, Sid spoke elegantly and exquisitely and very graciously, and I'm grateful for that. For many years, for the last 11 years, I've been hoping to bring Peter Hammerstead over to India to have a look at the projects here. And since we met you 4 or 5 years ago, it's always been my dream to have you with us because of that added dimension that you add to it. Great deep knowledge of India, the cultures, the colors, the complexities, the frustrations. You've lived through them all, and indeed to some small extent, so have I. But you've added so much to our experience in the last 3 weeks. I've thoroughly enjoyed every minute of it, and we talk about it every night after we've had dinner. It's been a wonderful experience for us. Normally when we do our India projects, we tend to see between 40 and 50 projects, and this time we've seen less. Because we start at 7 in the morning and we finish at 11. The beauty of this trip has been that we've had time to come back and have an early dinner and unwind and have a conversation under the beautiful palm trees, and it's been joy for Trix and I to have you and Peter with us. Which projects do you think you enjoyed? I know you probably enjoyed all of them, but give us 2 sentences on each of the ones that you liked.
For me, this afternoon morning star was very special. I think being from India, there's always been a very strong sense of community and a connection to people. And to see that there's 100 kids there, all abandoned and being taken care of because somebody in the world unconnected to them agreed to reach out and give them their helping hand and propel them to a life that every individual deserves and should have the dignity to live. I think that was very special. The bears at Bannerghatta again yesterday were very special, to see the passion of Dr. Arun, to see the freedom that the bears had. To think of, there was one bear as we were driving out, which ran back and forth 10 feet. That bear would run to a tree, turn around and run back. And I told Peter that that bear was probably tied on a 5-foot string that allowed him to go 10 feet in each direction of where he was tied from. And even though he's free, he's running exactly 10 feet because that was what he would have done agitated for most of his life. But at least for the other 83 bears, there's 70 acres of land to run around in. There's people who care for them. They've got the best of nutrition. There's a doctor who's invested many years finding out what the reason for their tuberculosis could be. Met doctors called MDs, done research all across the world. And that's the sort of care that abused animals would probably never receive elsewhere in the world.
True.
He's taken everything that he has and he's invested into it. And that makes that place very special. But again, these are just two things that stand out, and it's close to Bangalore where you're from, and I can realize why it's so special for you. Just one visit has made Bangalore so much special. I want to come back to it and spend some time here even later this year. But just Karthik and Geeta, Pradeep, I think I forgot to mention it to Peter at dinner, but I remember when we were driving to the VSPCA bowl installations to meet Anu Shri, Pradeep was on the phone. And we took a U-turn. He kept talking on the phone. He got off. He came back. We took a U-turn again. We stopped in the middle of the road. Pradeep was still on his phone, but this time he had a loaf of bread, 2 plastic glasses and a bottle of water. Still talking on the phone, he went to the dog. He put the bread out. He gave it water. He came back and we drove off. And for the 3 of us, we kept laughing. We kept talking till we reached that point. But that man, who does this day in and day out, managed to pick that up, go back, buy exactly what was needed, come back, look for the dog, call his VSPCA center. That dog was probably picked up that afternoon and is now eating healthy food, has been neutered, and is never going to be looked at as a menace on the street, isn't going to starve. And I think these acts of kindness and these acts of compassion and attention that your projects or the people in charge of your projects in India show it's very rare. The 24/7 attention, the complete vision to see through what they've started, to expand. That mind, Pradeep's mind is like a maze. You can get in at one end, but you don't know where you're going to get out. He's the only one who knows where the turtle project comes out, where the Narasimha temple project ends, where what ends. He's got all mapped in his head. And when you meet him for a few days, it's just a maze.
Exactly.
And I think these people are so special. And
I often make a joke that I say that if anyone ever wants nominees for a Nobel Prize, come on a trip with me to India and I'll give you a list of 500 names that you would support. And Pradeep, of course, would certainly be one. And it was great joy to watch you and Peter, feeding the elephants, putting your hands into their mouths under their trunks, and being able to feed the bears out of your hands. It's really quite an extraordinary experience, I think, particularly for Peter, who's never seen anything like this before.
Absolutely. I think he's done really well in India. I think I see him coming back to India more often.
I hope so.
I think his introduction to India has been... Even for me, I've lived here 32 years of my life, but for the first time there's actually been looking beyond the reasons that stop us. For me, in conversation, it's so far being, there's a human-animal conflict. Animals are being pushed to the fringes. Forest covers are disappearing. Elephant corridors are being taken over. But I've never gone and looked beyond what's happening on the other side. And through the two of you, to see the projects that are actually on the other side and talking about the same issues, but from me being the passive side of the conversation and them being the active side of the conversation, it's a big learning experience.
Right.
It's ignited something in me to come back and do something more for these animals rather than sit on the couch and talk about them. and make a real difference. So
Well,
thank you for that.
It's a pleasure. But watching you today with all those young children at Morning Star, I'm going to take those beautiful images away with me. I'm going to take them to my grave, because I think today, seeing you and Peter enjoy yourself at one of our projects was such a joy for me. It's probably going to be one of the highlights of my life. And I want to thank you for being a part of it. Thank you, Sid.
Thanks, Phil. Thanks, Trix.